Chris and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are going to talk about stacks. What is a stack? Stack is a linear data structure which accompanies the principles of LIFO, also known as last in first out. So what are some examples for this stack in real life? We can take a pile of books or a deck of cards or some coins. So how can we use this method of stack in data structures? So that's what we are going to talk about in today's video. Okay, so as an example, I have taken 4 separate books. I have numbered them so we can identify them easily. What we do in a stack data structure is we take the first element, which is the book number 1, and then place it here. And after that, we are going to take the second element, which is book number 2, and then place it over the book number 1. Likewise, we do the same with the third element, which is book number 3, and finally we are going to do the same to the book number 4. So, as I said earlier, we use the principle last in first out in a stack, also known as LIFO. The reason why we use this technique here is, as you guys can see, the fourth book, which is the book that we inserted last, is the book that we are going to take out as the first book here. For example, think this as a bucket and we have placed 4 books here. So in order to take these books out from this bucket, first we have to take the 4th book out. So when we do that, we are going to have a stack which has 3 elements, which will be this: the third book, the second book and the first book. So if we do the same thing, which means LIFO again, so now the last book that we have inserted will be the third book. So we do the same here. We are going to have only left with the second book and the first book. Do the same thing again, and we are going to have a stack which has only one element, which will be the first book. And finally, if we take this book also, then we are going to have an empty stack which have no elements. Okay. So as another example, I have 3 elements here, which will be the element number 1, 2 and 7. So if we are going to place these 3 elements in the stack, first I am going to insert our first element, which will be number 1, to this stack like this, and then I am going to insert my second number, which will be number 2, to the stack like this, and finally my third element, which will be number 7, like this. So as I said before, if you are going to take these elements out, first we have to take the last element, which will be number 7, out, and then we are going to take out the second element, which would be the last element at this current state, out from our stack, which will be number 2. And finally, we are going to take the first element, which will be the last element at the current state of this stack, out from it, which will be number 1. So I hope you guys have a small idea how a stack works. And after that, we are going to talk about the operation of a stack and then how we can implement those things. In a stack data structure, there are several operations. So one would be the push method, pop method, peek method, isEmpty method, isFull method, and finally delete stack method. we will be talking about individual of these methods in this video. So I would give a small introduction about these things, like what they do in a stack. So the first one, push method. If we want to insert data into a stack, we use this push method. And if we want to take out data from a stack, we use this pop method. And if you want to see the first element in a stack, we use this peek method. If we have the doubt like is this stack empty or not, then we can use this isEmpty method to see whether our stack is empty or not. And when we take this isFull method, the function of this method is we can identify whether our stack is full or not, whether there are any more spaces to fill or else is the stack full. And finally, the delete stack method, we use this method to delete the stack. So let's talk about these methods individually. Okay, so first we will be taking a look at the push method. Suppose we have a stack which is an empty stack like this. Now I am going to take 3 elements and I am going to put them into this empty stack. So in order to do this, we are going to use this push method. So I am going to write stack dot, we are going to use the method push here, push, and then we are going to write our element, which will be the number 7. So if we execute this, then we would have a stack which have one element which will be number 7. Stack with only one element which will be number 7. And after that I am going to insert another number. So we use the same code, stack dot. Again we use the push method. This time I am going to insert number 2. So now if we look at our stack, we would have a stack with 2 elements which would be number 2 and 7 likewise. And finally I am going to add another element to this stack. So I am going to use the same code here, stack dot push. This time I am going to insert the value number 1 here. So if we look at our stack, now we would have a stack with 3 elements which will be 1, 2 and 7. For if you guys need a visual representation of this stack, now at the current moment we have a stack with these elements. So first I inserted number 7 and then I inserted number 2 and finally I inserted number 1. So this is our stack at the moment. So that's what the push method is used for. Basically we use this push method in order to insert data or insert value to our stack. Next we are going to talk about the pop method. So we use this pop method basically to take out elements from our stack. I'm going to use the same elements that I used in the previous examples, which will be number 1, 2 and 7, to explain this pop method to you guys. So currently I have a stack with 3 elements, which will be number 1, 2 and 7. So you guys can see here also I have drawn another visual representation of this stack. So like previously, I'm going to take out an element from my stack. So stack dot pop. The last element that we have placed in our stack. So I think you guys can remember in the previous example we entered number 1 lastly, so which means the first element that is going to be pop out from this stack will be number 1. I think you guys can remember I said in the introduction we can't take any elements from this position or this position because this stack is like a bucket. So in order to take the number 7 from out of this stack, then we would have to take both of these elements from the stack, because we can't take any element from the stack which are not in the last position at that moment. So when we execute this code, we are going to have a stack with only 2 elements, which would be stack 2 and 7. And if we going to do the same again, stack pop, and the last element at that current state, which will be number 2. So now we are going to have a stack with only 1 element, which would be number 7. Again I am going to take out the element that I have in my stack, which will be number 7. So stack dot pop, and the last element at that current state of my stack. So now I am going to have a stack with 0 elements, which will be an empty stack. So I will revise it again. First, I took out 1 element, which would be the last element. I am going to pop out 1 element from my stack, which will be this number 1. And after that, I took the last element at that current state of my stack out, which would be number 2. Finally, I took out this number 7, which was the last element of my stack at that current state. But if we continue this function furthermore, stack dot pop, if we execute this function here, now as you guys can remember, I had a stack with only 3 elements, and then I popped out each element one by one, and at this current state my stack became empty. So if I did this function again, then I will be having an error message saying my stack is empty, so I can't use this function any further. So that is what the pop method does. It basically takes out elements from my stack. Next we are going to talk about the peek method. So I'm going to use the same elements as before, so you guys can take a better understanding of the stack. So currently I have a stack with three elements, which will be number 1, 2 and 7. So in peek method, what we do is we can peek the first element in the stack. For example, suppose we have a stack like this with 2 elements. Let's say we have number 8 and 4, likewise. And if we use the peek method here, then if we use peek method here, then I will be having a value which will be number 8. Another example, let's say we have a 3 element stack here, 1, 7 and 10, likewise. So if I use again the peek method, then I will be returning this 10 value. Then I will be having this value 10. Okay. Then I will be returning this value, which will be number 10. So let's take this example, our original example, and I'm going to write the code as before, which will be stack. Instead of pop, I'm going to use the peek method. And when I do this, I will be having the value number 1, because it's the first, or it's the number that is the topmost value in my stack at the current moment. So I will be returning number 1 here. So if we use the same code again, which will be stack dot peek at that time also I will be returning the same value, which will be number 1, because we haven't done any alterations to our stack. So every time we use this code, I will be returning this value, which will be number 1. After that, we are going to take a look at isEmpty method. In isEmpty method, I will be only returning boolean values, which will be true or false. So suppose we have the stack which I used earlier with 3 elements, 1, 2 and 7, and if we use this isEmpty method here, stack, and this current state, you guys can see my stack isn't empty, it has 3 elements in it. So I will be returning a boolean value, which will be return false. Returning false. Likewise, and suppose we have an empty array, so shift on array value false. So suppose we have an empty stack, it will be stack equals, likewise we have an empty stack, and if we use this code here to this stack, which will be stack dot, and I'm going to use this isEmpty method, likewise, and at this moment I will return the value return true, because as you guys can see my stack is empty, so I will be returning the value true here. So we use this isEmpty method to check whether my stack is empty or not. Next, I am going to talk about this isFull method. So in order to use this method, we have to set a maximum numbers to our stack. So I'm going to use a 5-element stack in order to teach you guys this. So I would have to alter my stack, which will be having 5 elements. Let's say 10, 8, 2, 5 and 1. So this will be my current stack. So I'm going to use this isFull method to my stack. Stack dot isFull and if you execute this code, then I will be returning with a boolean saying that my stack is full because I have already 5 elements in my stack. Return true here. Suppose we have a stack with only 3 elements, like the example that I used before, 1, 2 and 7. Now my maximum number is 5, so I only have a stack with only 3 elements, which means I have 2 slots free for another 2 elements. So I'm going to use the same method, stack dot isFull and now I will be having the return value as false. Likewise, finally, I'm going to talk about the delete method. So as an example, I have the previous stack with me, which has 5 elements in it. So I'm going to use this delete method on it. Stack dot delete. Likewise, so I think this is pretty simple. So when we use this delete method on our stack, our entire stack, which is this, will be deleted. So that's what the delete method does to our stack. If you guys have any questions or any comments, it would be appreciated if you can put that in the comment section below. Remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you guys can learn more about data structures. This is the end of my video. Thank you for watching.